My name is Anton. I am passionate about being provocative and making people think about the inputs and outputs that form the dynamics of the world that we live in. I've heard in the last 20 years or so several times an axiom that you normally hear from technocrats and lazy social scientists, that it is now in the modern world easier to kill 1 million people than it is to govern them. That's the type of thing you would imagine, I don't know, Robert McNamara or Dick Cheney or Donald Rumsfeld saying. Are slides moving? Oh, there we go. However, this is a thought game, and thought games and hypotheticals can be useful. I think this one potentially could be. The depth and robustness of understanding of any model that organizes the world is tested at the margins. It's the far out insane ideas that give you the most information about your understanding of the world. Building a model always includes a lot of political decisions. Model building and understanding of dynamics reflects the values and the priorities of the researcher. Instead of just data, what we want to do is capture the essence of the relationships, because in those relationships are expressions of what it is that the observer actually thinks is important and what actually is worth measuring. All models are imperfect because clearly they're made by human beings, and nobody in this room is perfect. I challenge you to that if you think you are. I bet I can find something before you leave. Whenever you add complexity to a model or to a system, you get no more accuracy, but you simply increase the chance for more mistakes. You hear the phrase, someone can be accurate, or someone can be precise, but not accurate. Most accounting delays consequences, meaning that the people who are doing the accounting at that time are favoring the status quo, because that's when they are in power. It favors the power of now. And this can lead to false authority precision. You can have accuracy, but you can have precision, but you can have no accuracy. Pi is not that. That's a very precise number. It's not accurate. And that's what happens a lot of times when you're building models, when you're trying to replicate what actually happens in the real world. Also what happens a lot is that the gains of the model are privatized, but the losses are socialized. A small coterie of people get all the good stuff. When bad stuff happens, everybody has to share in that. You see that happening a lot in all types of models and all types of expressions of the world. I think that's generally just an excuse. And a lot of people simply say compassion has no part in politics and policy. We must deal with people in the aggregate. We have to deal with the real world. We can't allow our hearts to have any sort of input into what it is that we are doing. We're trying to understand what the world consists of and how to best react to it. So I would argue that just for a few minutes, if all of you can just join me on the dark side, take your hearts out, put them under your chair. We're going to select the variables and define the relationships and look for supporting evidence and best guesses to determine whether or not it actually is easier to kill 1 billion people than it is to govern them. This is the type of stuff I really enjoy doing because it makes you think. It's provocative. And it makes you think about things that you probably have never considered before. And like I said, this is a thought exercise. This can be a lot of fun. So everybody come with me to the dark side. Some assumptions. Ease roughly equals cost. So when we say something is easier, we say it costs less. So that's what we're going to assume for building our model. Governing and killing, we have to normalize who it is that we're doing this to. So we're going to assume that we're going to govern and kill the same rough population. 1 million Westerners. One of the questions that came up to me, though, was, are Swedes easier to kill or govern than Brazilians, than Turks, than the Han Chinese? These are the types of questions that you have to normalize when you're building a model, because those variables are very difficult to operationalize. Ultimately, the further I got into this, I realized that this was a master's thesis. And this is something that's extremely difficult to pack into 5 minutes. So basically what you have to do is cheat and make a lot of assumptions. Also, another assumption that I realized I had to make was concerning population density. That makes a difference in both governing and killing. It's a lot easier to kill a bunch of people when they're all in the same place. It's also a lot easier to govern a bunch of people when they're all in the same place. So are we talking a terrain that's flat or mountainous? Talking an arid climate, or are we talking forests? Obstacles like forests and mountains cause the price or the ease the ease of killing and governing to actually go up. because they institute variables into the model that you now have to account for that you wouldn't have to in a flat environment or an arid environment where there's nowhere to hide and there's no obstacles you have to build around. The methods of government. We're going to assume that for this model, the government is a representative democracy. That's what we're most familiar with, and it's something that we probably have the greatest common understanding of, so we don't have to put a lot of effort into making a lot of additional assumptions about that. And the method of killing, tomahawk cruise missiles. They're effective from a distance, but there's no threat of radiation or infection like you would have from biological warfare. So you can be 2,000 miles away and just lob cruise missiles at a population from a great distance and have some confidence, actually a very high rate of confidence with Tomahawk cruise missiles, that they're going to hit where they're supposed to hit. So our model that we're going to test is a flat, Western representative democracy with a regular urban-suburban population density. It's about 2,500 people per square mile. All occupants are equally vulnerable to cruise missile attack. That means nobody has bomb shelters, nobody's bought a bunch of gold and canned goods from commercials off Fox News and shoved them into a basement somewhere. Not going to worry about that. Inputs and outputs. Approximately $12,000 a year per person in the United States is spent just to govern one person at the federal level. That's your cost, each of you, of the annual budget on average. One Tomahawk missile costs about $1.5 million to launch, has a kill blast radius of 200 feet, but there's no accounting for the loss in target richness, meaning that the 100th missile that you shoot costs more per life than the first missile that you shoot because you killed a bunch of people already. So trying to get that 1 millionth guy when you're trying to kill him is really, really difficult. That guy costs a lot. So the stock of 1 million people, the flow of government dollars, or boom. So that's ultimately what we're going to try to measure. And this is where I realized that I am an absolutely horrible human being, and I got sick to my stomach. I had an epiphany, and not just the whiskey that was causing that. My desire to validate or invalidate the hypothesis was suddenly trumped by my humanity. Once I started putting a little bit more thought into what it was I was considering, it stopped making sense. It stopped being something that seemed useful to me. You can no longer dismiss these types of thought games as just that, as a game. This no longer felt useful. Technology is useful if it advances our humanity, not replaces it. And I was, in the example that came to mind is, whenever you call a phone tree when you're trying to get a live person on the phone, eventually you have to push 15 buttons and you don't get to the live person. It's frustrating. Technology, in that regard, is not advancing our humanity at all. And that's a small instance. So when I'm thinking about how we govern people versus killing them, what's the cost-benefit analysis of that? Using a technology to make that determination doesn't do anybody any good. Peter Drucker once said, there is surely nothing quite so useless as doing with great efficiency that which should not be done at all. Bertrand Russell said, whenever possible, substitute constructions out of known entities for inferences to unknown entities. Those two quotes stuck out in my brain because it made me realize that this type of model building has to have some sort of point. It actually has to be useful. It has to be something constructive. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels. There's no point to it ultimately if you don't have a good reason as to why you're doing it. Several conclusions about technology and civilization. These are some of the things that popped in my brain as I was thinking about this. We need to spend more time asking, should we? And now that for all intents and purposes, can we is a moot point. Yes, we can do damn near anything, but should we? Just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should. So yeah, we can make the determination as to whether it's easier to kill 1 million people as to govern them, but who is that useful to? Whole pot? That's not it. That's the short list of people that would actually get some value out of that construction is what I came up with. Our ability to act in danger is far outpacing our ability to think critically. Whoa, you just jumped.
Sorry. We're going back.
I'm almost done, so it's all good. Our ability to act in danger far outpaces our ability to think critically. Technology took a great leap forward in the last 150 years, which is only about 0.1% of our existence as modern men. Which means, ultimately, the amount of effort that we put into building constructive things is nowhere near our amount of effort that we put into devising ways to destroy each other. And so when you consider the amount of time, there's a tremendous imbalance there that we have to internally focus on and start taking account of. Statements frame what could be real world discussions, geopolitical decisions, making a false dichotomy. There's no either or. There's no governing or killing. We have to get rid of those false dichotomies when we're making these types of decisions. And racing to the depths of cynicism rarely produces anything constructive. I mean, at any level of government, in any level of any institution, it's the most cynical people that are the ones who are least likely to actually do anything that's worth anything. We've been around for about 250,000 years in our modern form, and we've had all that time to consider our relationships to ourselves, to each other, and to the universe. And suddenly we increase our computing complexity and ability by an order of complexity and ability by an order of magnitude every few months. We as a species have to start taking a long view. Tech empowers us in that it shortens space and time. The time it takes for us to get to where we want to go is shorter than it has ever been, and we know for a fact in the future it's going to be even shorter. But that can't be a one-way street. We also have to give ourselves the ability to look backwards and understand where we came from, and make sure that we are actually considering our internal humanity when we're making decisions about how the world works and the models that we choose to express ourselves. Kul Chandra Gautam is a former Assistant Secretary of the United Nations. You're not going to have time to read this slide, but it is absolutely unbelievable quote. If you can stop it there and just let everybody read that slide, I would love that. But this captures the sentiments that I wanted to express this evening. Make sure that whenever you're thinking about the world around you, that you start with your heart and not with your head, that you start with the things that you are most concerned about and compassionate about, as opposed to things that will ultimately make your life easier. Because we all have to live on this planet together.